In a lot of organizations, you're finding tools are not necessarily the problem. Culture is a big challenge. Do the leaders actually use the technology? Do they understand where there's opportunity and where there's not? A lot of folks are getting pressures from their board, pressure from the CEO to say, hey, we're going to go be AI first, but they don't actually know what that means. What does it mean to be AI first? What exactly are the use cases? Where should we be deploying this stuff first and foremost? How do we need to change our operating practices, et cetera, et cetera?
Yo, it's the future. Don't hit the snooze. AI is here giving humans the boost. Team Humans rolling, brains in the game with Dan Turchin. Y'all remember the name. People reign in the mix, no stopping the flow. Better work, better life. Yeah, we're ready to go. Robots and humans, a collab, Okay, let's start the show.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work, a very special episode of the podcast. This is episode 400. We've reached the 4-century mark, and we got a great guest for today. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. If you haven't yet joined our weekly newsletter, do it. Mash that button in the show notes. If you like this episode, and you better, or any other that we've published, you owe it to humanity to pay it forward. Share that episode or the podcast with just one friend. They'll know that you're invested in making humans better with AI. If you leave a comment, I may share it in an upcoming episode, like this one from Tina, who hails from Munich, Germany, and is a startup marketer. Tina's favorite episode is number 295 with Thomas Otter, one of the all-time greats, general partner at Acadian Ventures, about how one good decision made him an accidental HR tech pioneer. We will link to that one in the show notes. We learn from AI thought leaders weekly, and of course, the added bonus, you get one AI fun fact. Here it is for today. Personal friend Isaac Sakalik writes at CIO Online about whether or not agentic AI is the end of SaaS tools. In it, he says, while a total collapse of the SaaS model is unlikely, AI is fundamentally changing how software is developed and consumed. Recent benchmarks showing AI's ability to write the majority of its own code and the rise of vibe coding have led some to believe CIOs might build rather than buy. Key considerations for CIOs: building makes sense for proprietary workflows, but only if the organization can maintain rigorous DevSecOps and governance standards. Software may become more composable and invisible, where AI agents interact with backend systems via natural language. CIOs should push for outcome-based pricing rather than traditional seat-based licenses, especially as AI agents begin to perform work previously done by humans. The value of established SaaS providers is shifting from their code to their domain expertise and their ability to integrate with an enterprise's proprietary data. Of course, we'll share a link to that full article in the show notes, my commentary on this one. Even when conversational AI can update a customer record, generate call notes, book travel, or review an expense report, there will still be a need for analytics, governance, and visual storytelling that go far beyond simple prompts. The decades of data and domain expertise owned by SaaS vendors in domains like CRM and ITSM and ERP and security will become increasingly important as AI homogenizes all the content. We have more analysts than ever thanks to spreadsheets, even though Excel eliminated the data entry function. We have more radiologists than ever thanks to AI reading X-rays. In the former case, better tools led to increased demand for business analyses. It also led to better decisions. In the latter case, more people now get MRIs, now that AI adds capacity to support higher patient throughput and lower cost. We all benefit from the disinflationary effect of technology. AI improves access and reduces the cost to deliver the same services. SaaS vendors need to adapt to outcome-based pricing and new conversational interfaces. All the hyperventilating about the death of SaaS misses the real point, which is that AI is disrupting how humans interact with machines, which, you know what, it's net positive for everyone. Now shifting to this week's very relevant conversation. I've been looking forward to this one. Wade Foster is a rare repeat guest on the podcast. His first episode was number 217 back in January 2024, which seems like eons ago. Wade's the CEO and co-founder of Zapier, the workflow automation tool used by over 4 million people to connect more than 7,000 work apps. To date, Zapier has automated more than 81 billion tasks and more than 25 million Zaps have been created. Wade and his co-founder Brian launched the company in 2012 as part of the YC S12 batch and have built one of the most impressive companies of our generation. They bootstrapped Zapier to a valuation north of $5 billion. They've done it by living their core values and humbly building products people love. Wade holds degrees in industrial engineering and business administration from the University of Missouri-Columbia. Go Tigers. And with all that said, it's my pleasure to welcome Wade back to the podcast. Wade, good to see you, man.
Yeah.
Give us an update. What's new in your world?
Yeah, good to be back, Dan, for episode 400, no less. That's pretty cool. We're just shipping as much stuff as we can over here in Zapier land. That's what's new.
More than 2 years ago, I said it seems like eons ago, but oh my gosh, just think about how the world has changed. What stands out to you? In April 2026 versus January 2024. What are the highlights in Wade world?
Well, I think the thing that is most obvious is what happened at the end of 2025. We had a new launch of frontier models. So this would have been Opus 4.5, GPT 5.3, and Gemini 3.0. And that set of models was a step forward increase in capability. It went from, coding agents that kind of worked to coding agents that actually work in practice. And, obviously that might seem very valuable if your, interests are in building software, but it actually has really big implications for all knowledge workers, because it turns out if every knowledge worker has access to a coding engine, basically every knowledge worker has an engineer that can help them do their job. And so much of the work we do day to day can be boiled down to like these little workflows that a coding agent can assist with, can automate, and can help you do your job way, way, way better. And so, it's still early, but you certainly see engineers benefiting massively from this. But inside Zapier, we're starting to see every function. People, marketing, sales, finance, you name it, are all accelerating because they have access to these frontier models.
Wade, for the 3 people on the planet who aren't familiar with Zapier, and I assume they're all listening to this podcast, just a little bit about your amazing origin story, and just share what Zapier does.
So Zapier is the most connected AI orchestration platform alive. We started as an integration company. We helped you connect the tools you were using. So Salesforce, QuickBooks, Slack, Trello, you name it. And quickly added workflow to the mix. And then nowadays, you've got agents, you've got workflows, you've got our Zapier MCP that helps you bring those capabilities into your agent harness, whether that's Claude or ChatGPT or Codex or Claude Code, you name it. And so, basically we've spent a decade plus trying to help you automate your work and make it so that your tools work for you and not against you.
One of the things that is interesting about where Zapier got its start versus the current world is that Zapier is all about automating deterministic workflows. So I know exactly what I needed to do. I'm going to automate the task. It's going to do it the same way every time. And along comes AI, and it's all about non-deterministic workflows. So I know you live it every minute of your life, but to others, it might seem confusing about where the non-deterministic portion of AI complements the deterministic portion of the workflow that Zapier owns.
Yeah. Well, it turns out both of these are really valuable. In fact, most of us at work, we probably value deterministic workflows more than non-deterministic ones, especially in enterprise examples, because we want things that are reliable, cost-effective, and do the same thing every single time. What you get from a non-deterministic workflow and what you get from AI is the ability to open up use cases that were really tough to be deterministic. And these often involve unstructured data. So think like call transcripts. You've got a big old bucket of call data. This is common in the people world because you interview candidates all the time. and you've got these call transcripts coming in. Well, how are you going to plug that into a deterministic workflow? And the answer is like, you can't really. But with an LLM, they can help you do interesting things with it. So you might say, hey, I've got a rubric to assess these candidates. And so yes, the interviewer is going to like assess the candidate against the rubric, but also I want to have an AI take a stab at trying to assess against this rubric too. And so they have a set of examples of like, this is a good answer, this is a bad answer, this is what we're scoring on. How did the candidate answer those things? And it can reason over the top of those answers and start to turn that unstructured data into something that's more structured. And that then I think lands you in this case of like these hybrid workflows, which is actually where I think the world is going, is you're going to see these sort of mix and match of deterministic and non-deterministic workflows where you're going to sort of reach for these, the capabilities that AI can provide in places where you can't get it from a deterministic workflow, but you're still going to want to like lock it together in a way that allows you to get the most reliability and cost efficiency over time. And so, the people that I see that are most sophisticated with this are often doing those types of blended workflows.
One of the challenges introducing non-deterministic behavior, of course, is it adds risk because it's based on statistical probabilities, and it's probably going to do something that you'd expect, but it might not. Mm-hmm. And we talk a lot, in the industry about the importance of context and grounded data and tool calling, using appropriate guardrails. Just kind of talk me through how you and the team have approached that at Zapier.
Yeah, I think so. Our approach has been that we spend a lot of time building these like hybrid use cases where you might where we see the most value out of using the LLM is actually to go build the workflow. Hey, I want to go describe this in natural language. I want to take these interview transcripts, compare them to a rubric, generate this output, log it in our ATS, right? I want to describe what that workflow looks like. But then when I go to run the workflow, I actually want that to look much more like code, like a program. And that's where Zapier helps convert that to a structured workflow that runs in a very deterministic way. And we can assert for you which parts might need to run through AI. So for example, the part where we're going to go look at the interview transcript and compare it to a rubric. Okay, that's an AI step right there. But then the part where we take the answers, we feed them into an applicant tracking system, we notify this person, like those things follow a very rigorous steps that don't actually need an LLM to do them. And those are the things you want to happen in a structured way over time. And so, that is the pattern that works the best is you can build with AI because it's so good at understanding human language and human context. And you can kind of have that back and forth where you can say, oh, yes, like that. Or, that's close, but not quite. Can you sort of adjust it to be more like this? And then once you've got it locked the way you like, you say, great, run that every time. And that becomes a program versus an agent that is actually like making its own decisions every single time. Instead, you've got a program that runs in a very specific way every single time.
Very satisfying answer. Thank you. Those who have not used Zapier, which again is a dwindling few on the planet, but imagine there are a few, may not or may learn about MCP, Model Context Protocol, and say, I no longer need Zapier because my agents are going to talk to other agents via MCP. And that protocol was designed so that I don't need an orchestration layer. You mentioned that there is obviously an MCP server available via Zapier. Talk to us about orchestration platform, orchestration layer, how that complements or is complemented by the MCP protocol.
Yes. So this, I think, is really important. Increasingly, the way folks like to build automation is they like to do it in an agent harness. So, you might be wanting to talk to your tools inside of Claude or ChatGPT, or maybe for the more sophisticated folks, they're already using something like Claude Code or Codex or Cursor or something like this that is like a more pure play coding agent out of the box. And oftentimes you want these tools, you want this agent to go work with the tools and data that you have. You want it to work with, your calendar, your email, your documents, your CRM, your HRIS system, like you name it. You have all sorts of data that are like logged in disparate sources. And your day-to-day often involves going into these tools and doing work and compiling and pulling them together in different sources and then creating something new and pushing that out to a new world. So that's the workflow that most of us sort of live in. Now, it turns out a lot of times when you go ask these tools to go work with another tool, you have a couple options. The first is you can say, hey, can you go connect for me? Now, if you're in a coding agent like Claude Code or Cursor or Codex or something like that, the agent will often say, sure, I can help you. Can you give me the API key? Now, on the surface, this seems great. Oh, cool. I just have to give you my API key and you'll go do this for me magically. And for someone who has maybe not been exposed to engineering best practices, this is going to feel like an amazing experience. But quickly, what you realize is that copying and pasting API keys, plain text into files is not something that you should be doing. Engineers learned that long ago, but now we have so many more white-collar workers exposed to these tools and are now able to build things in interesting ways. They're often learning the hard way some of these best practices that you should do. Now, what you get by using Zapier MCP, or soon we're launching an SDK, is you're able to come in and connect your apps to Zapier. So you can paste those API keys, you can OAuth into those tools through Zapier, and now Zapier can help you pull all these things together. So you can say, hey, I want to go, I'll give you an example from me. At the end of my day, I have my agent run a daily recap. And what it does is it goes and reviews all of my meeting notes. I use Granola. It goes and looks at my outstanding to-do items, and it looks at the ones that I completed from the day. It goes and looks at all the Slack messages I sent and the threads that happened from the day. It reviews my calendar for the day, and it reviews all my email for the day. And then it packages that all up and says, here's what happened today. This. Here's what action items you have for yourself based on, what I saw in Granola and all these other things. These are the important things you need to do next. By the way, Wade, do you want to add any extra context to this? And, usually I'll do a quick voice to text and say, yeah, here's 2 or 3 things I think are really important we need to remember. And then it compiles that all into an end-of-day recap. Every step of the way, Zapier is the tool facilitating interaction with all those data. So it's reaching out to Granola and pulling those notes. It's reaching out to Slack, pulling in the context there. It's reaching out to Google Calendar, pulling from there. It's reaching out to Gmail and pulling from there and helping me put together this tool that then follows up on all those action items. When the agent sort of says, here's the action items you need to do, often it'll say, you need to write this email, you need to do these Slack status updates. Then I'm saying, great, can you go ahead and build those for me? Sure, got it. And then Zapier's reaching out and drafting the emails in Gmail. It's sending the Slack messages out that way. And so it's so valuable when you as a knowledge worker have access to a tool like Zapier MCP or the SDK that can bring all those tools together in a governed, trusted way, combine them with an agent like Claude or Codex or you name it, that can now go out and interact with the world on your behalf. And that, I think, is where there's going to be an increasing number of knowledge workers that are going to realize, this is so powerful. It's a super way to work for everyone, not just engineers, but for everyone. I've been working this way now for 4 or 5 months. I'm not going back. It is so excellent to work this way.
So it's the control plane that manages all the agentic behaviors for your agent 100%. Or agents. And you also, it's auditable, right? It's one system of record that you have where you can see all of the tool calls, all the workflows that have been run on your behalf. Yeah.
And it's all these the place where it benefits me in a couple key ways. So this daily recap, the fact that it's drafting those emails, the fact that it's following up on these Slack items, it's all these things at the end of the day. It used to take me, an hour to close out my day just to follow up on all these threads, every which direction. And then oftentimes I didn't even get to all of them. Some of them I just had to be well, that's not happening today. And now in 5 minutes at the end, all this stuff is teed up for me, and I just have to do quick approvals, press send, go. And so I'm able to stay on top of all of this stuff. Then what happens is I start to find that I have more blocks of time in my day. And then it gets really interesting because how do I want to go spend that time? Oftentimes I'm thinking, Do I want to come be on another Dan's podcast, for episode 400? Do I want to go work on a new marketing campaign? Is there a new product that I want to go launch? Is there a new, it sort of opens up this time to like really go invest in something that's going to propel the company forward, rather than me having to go chase down loose threads all over the place that don't uniquely require my expertise and skill sets. I think those are the places where AI is so magnificent, is it can do those things, and it can lead me to do things that I think I'm uniquely valuable at, versus just being sort of a glorified errand boy for certain things.
CISOs are cringing when they hear us have the conversation, because the threat of just one rogue agentic behavior is large, particularly when you multiply it across, all of, Wade as CEO, all of your employees, all the employees of your customers. How do you think about guardrails around what Zapier can and can't do, kind of the breadth of things that you can do through an SDK or through MCP versus what should be allowed?
Yeah. Well, so you as a CISO or any sort of leader who's tasked with this right now, it feels like you have two options. One is you can say no. But if you say no to all of these capabilities, you are now competing with your hands tied behind your back. You've got other people who are willing to play this way, and your competitors are going to leapfrog you just because they're able to tap into this unfettered power. The alternative is you say, okay, we're going to go do all this stuff. And now, to your point, Dan, you feel like you're exposing yourself to all this risk. We're like, I don't have good governance. I don't have good tooling. I don't have ways to audit and keep the sort of checks and balance and power here. That also feels like pretty scary and intimidating. So that's where you do need a third way. And this is one of those places where, we're taking a big swing at this, because I think if you use Zapier as the control plane for accessing all your tools, you get two really powerful things. One, for the individual employee, you now have a tool that you can take from AI harness to AI harness that brings all your tools, all your context with you. So you don't have to reset all this stuff up over and over again. Instead, you've just got your connected tools, your library of context that just you can walk into any new fancy, whatever latest tool they're talking about on X or LinkedIn or YouTube. Like, you can go try it with Zapier MCP or Zapier SDK, and you have all that stuff already set up. So it's amazing for the individual user. For the CISO, what you get is a governance plane. You can come in and say, great, we're going to whitelist these applications. And beyond just these applications, we're going to whitelist certain HTTP endpoints. Now, this is really important because when you go connect apps, the way most of these tools work is the permissions are usually all or nothing. If I ask for you to connect, to my application through Slack OAuth, it's like, great, you can do everything in Slack or nothing in Slack. For a CISO, that's pretty terrifying. You might be comfortable granting that scope to some people in your company, but the larger your organization is, the less likely you're going to say that is true. But there are certain scopes where you might say, I'm okay with that. And so through Zapier, you can say, hey, these people will have read access to Salesforce, but only these folks can write to Salesforce. And so, this is where I think Zapier can start to play that role of helping you provide these capabilities to your employees, these capabilities to the agents to go build incredible, impressive things, but gives you some flexibility in how you deploy that. So it's not this all or nothing scenario. It gives you a third option, which I think increasingly is going to be the only option.
That's what I wanted the audience to hear you say. This is done in a thoughtful, responsible way. A kind of a related question is, Wade, the product person. I know you go back in the founding days. I know you were meticulously involved in every product decision, every new feature. Well, now great power comes great responsibility. Are there any examples of where maybe customers have come to you or to your team with a request for a new feature, and you've had to say, you know what, there's some unintended consequences, and me as the steward of exercising Zapier responsibly say, this is a risk we can't take. And any examples of that where there might be commercial value, but where you've had to kind of see around a blind corner on behalf of your users? Today's sponsor is a product I've used for over a decade. I wouldn't think of starting or investing in a company without it. It's Gusto, and it powers our payroll, benefits, and expense management at PeopleRain. Payday used to be the bane of my existence. I love paying my team, but I was always paranoid we'd screw up taxes or forget a state filing. One of the best ways to demonstrate you care about your team is to remove friction for them. I always say my job is to drive the Zamboni so my team can skate on smooth ice. Consider Gusto the keys to your new Zamboni. It's online payroll and benefits software built for small businesses. It's all in one, remote, friendly, and incredibly easy to use, so you can pay, hire, onboard, and support your team from anywhere. Gusto's ranked number 1 on G2's highest satisfaction products list for 2026 and trusted by over 500,000 small businesses. Consider this a public service announcement if you haven't yet experienced what it's like when running payroll is a source of joy. Now back to today's amazing conversation.
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of it's kind of fairly common where you sort of feel the tension and the pull from, an individual who is like, hey, trust me, I can go do this. Like, let me go da da da. And in the product world, these are often called foot guns. Like, are you going to allow the user to shoot themselves in the foot or not? And an enterprise buyer often says, no, I don't want those. Whereas like an individual small business owner might say, hey, actually, I want the power. Like, I'm in control of this stuff. Like, let me go use it to the maximal extent. And so that's often where some of the most interesting product decisions and debates come in, is like, what's the default setting here? Is there a toggle switch that sort of allows people to control these things back and forth? And so those are the types of areas where, I do think that there is still going to be a fair amount of like product thinking and product judgment exercised on like, how does our version of these things work? When it's increasingly easy to build the software, there still is, your vendors still have a point of view on like what they think the world should look like and how it should run. I think it's a big reason why, like, for example, OpenClaw was done in an open source way to begin with. So for folks who don't know, OpenClaw is, it's this like personal agent that you can, run on like a spare laptop, a Mac Mini, or put in a virtual machine somewhere, and you give it access to your tools, and it can just go do stuff everywhere. It's a pretty impressive product, but there's foot guns all over that product. Bad things can happen. But it's the type of thing that, of course, like Claude or ChatGPT, like, hey, they're probably not going to launch that, because it's like, hey, we can't quite expose ourselves to doing those things. But as an open source project, it's fantastic because all of us get to see and experience what the future could look like. And now a lot of companies are looking at that saying, we like those patterns. What might we do to provide some of those capabilities, but do it with a little more security?
The thing that's crazy about this world of developing software is that there was a time when software was deterministic, and if there was a problem, you, the vendor, or the author, the developer, were responsible for it because you could track it back to a bug or a line of code. Mm-hmm. Now, like, there's no code, there's no universe of everything that it could possibly do, and yet you, the vendor, are ultimately responsible for all the things that you couldn't possibly imagine that it could do, that it could still do. That's where I shared in a fun fact about, there will always be a need for a vendor to be able to own accountability. Do you have these conversations with your team about, we got to start planning for not just what we know it can do, but what we know we don't know it might do?
Well, I mean, we've got like evals on everything, trying to understand like when is it adhering in the way that we expect and when is it not. And, we pay attention to those outliers. And, so there's sort of some known patterns now to sort of help figure out like how you get it to sort of adhere to like the spec, I guess, at the end of the day. And then when it doesn't adhere to spec, like, well, why? What goes on there, and how do we what do we make of that, and what do we do about that? It's a pretty pretty common emerging practice amongst anyone building AI products.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Two things I wanted the audience to learn about in terms of you've done a remarkable job of kind of using your platform to educate others. And there's certainly new, of course, in the last 2 years since we last talked, but even the last recent months, one of the things I've seen you doing is hosting like AI strategy, almost like office hours, AI strategy sessions. Talk to us about kind of the genesis of that idea, and then just what are you learning? How is it working?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think as we've been building our product more and more to help people build these agentic capabilities, I wanted to just better understand like what's actually working for folks. Increasingly, I find that what you hear on X or YouTube or LinkedIn, there's so much sensationalism, there's so much hype that goes on that it can be a little bit difficult to discern fact from fiction. And there's sort of two mechanisms I find to help me with that. One is my own personal experience with these tools. I go sign up, I try, I use them a lot. But I also want to hear like, what are other people doing? What are they comfortable? What's working for them? What isn't working for them? What are the big problems they're facing? Is the problems with the tools, or is it more culture issues? Are they facing this problem or that problem? And so I needed a mechanism to do that. And, sharing more of our best practices, sharing more of what's working for us meant that we just got more feedback. We heard from more people, folks that were like, yes, we agreed. Or folks that were like, nah, that's BS. Like we don't think that that's true or that's good or whatnot. And all of that's very helpful. Like we love hearing all that feedback. And then also, as we like are out there, like talking to these folks who are customers or hopefully potential customers, we learn from them on what's going on. Now you ask like, what am I learning from these? Well, I think practically speaking, there's like a couple key learnings. I think, the engineering function is probably like furthest ahead in adoption of these tools and figuring out what's how to deploy them usefully. Other functions are not as far along. I think that makes practical sense. Like a lot of the tools are built by engineers for engineers. And so we're starting to see stuff for more functions and capabilities, but it just lags behind. In a lot of organizations, you're finding tools are not necessarily the problem. Culture is a big challenge. Do the leaders actually use the technology? Do they understand where there's opportunity and where there's not? A lot of folks are getting pressures from their board, pressure from the CEO to say, hey, we're going to go be AI first, but they don't actually know what that means. What does it mean to be AI first? What exactly are the use cases? Where should we be deploying this stuff first and foremost? How do we need to change our operating practices, et cetera, et cetera? And so they're sort of left to fend for themselves. There's not like a good set of leadership pointing to like a vision beyond just use AI. And so there's a little bit of a lack of that in a lot of companies. I'd say an interesting one that's starting to pop up more and more is, especially on the forward-facing companies, is you're seeing a lot of folks being successful with what I would call individual AI. That's, lots of individuals in the company are starting to cite meaningful impact for them, where they're like, I am much faster. My work is more productive. And you're seeing a large percentage of folks say that is happening. While at the same organization, what I would call institutional AI is citing, hey, we're not actually seeing the organizational ROI yet from this. And so, I think a lot of organizations are trying to figure out, well, how do we take what this sort of self-reported gains all these individuals are earning, and how do we actually translate into organizational success? And that often means rethinking your org chart, rethinking your systems and processes, rethinking how the job is done entirely. Because just because an individual can do great with it doesn't mean that compounds to the rest of the business. And so that's another interesting learning that I'm seeing pop up more frequently these days.
You mentioned rethinking the org chart. Another casually brilliant idea that you or the team had is for hiring at Zapier. You've now recently launched the second version of your AI Fluency rubric that you use for internal hiring. Talk about how you use it, what it is. You chose to share it which I think the world says thank you. How'd you come up with the idea?
So the gist of it was, we wanted to both transform our own organization. We said, hey, we want to have more AI happening inside of Zapier. And we heard from people in the company saying like, hey, well, yes, we're excited. We want to do that. Like, what practically are you looking for, Wade? So we heard that inside our own team, but we also heard it when I was out talking to other folks. They were like, we also want to do this too. But we need a little more specifics than that. And so we thought, hey, this is a place where I think we know how to solve this. Let's go talk to each of the most forward-thinking people in each of the functions and just ask them, what do you think the best people are how are they using AI? What are the use cases? What are the tools? What are the mindsets? What represents someone that does a good job of that? And we did what every good HR leader knows, is turn that into a rubric. We said, okay, this is what AI fluency looks like, and this is what it looks like in engineering and in marketing and in finance and in HR, et cetera, et cetera. And we thought it was useful, and so we released it and shared it. And it turns out that framework resonated with a lot of folks. I hear constantly from people who say like, hey, we use the Zapier AI fluency framework. And in fact, just this week released V2 of it. I think that's one of the big challenges with a rubric and AI these days, is that as soon as you release your V1 of a thing, it's going to be dated. And so, what we saw in our V1, while there are some things that carry over, there was a lot of the practical specifics that just needed to be updated to account for new capabilities and new use cases that people have figured out. What it meant to be, transformative in 2026 looks a lot different than in 2025, because we've just learned a lot in the last year as an industry.
I think it speaks a lot to the culture that I know you've intentionally built, your values. You're constantly experimenting. You're looking to modernize, but you're also doing it in a way that's transparent and humble. Mm-hmm. I appreciate it. Always stuck with me from our first conversation, but thought these were two good examples of how you're modernizing, you're iterating, but continue to be in learning mode.
Indeed, I know of no way to thrive than to just constantly try and learn, get better every day.
Unbelievably, we're about out of time. This one sped by, huh? But I'm not letting you off the hot seat without answering one last important question for me. I said on a short list of repeat guests, but let's go ahead and foreshadow to episode 3 of Wade on AI and the Future of Work. Just for conversation's sake, let's say it's 2028, not 2026. What's consuming the conversation that seems like just science fiction today?
Well, the way I'd probably answer that is the stuff that sounds like science fiction today that people might dismiss out of hand and say, wow, that's crazy, is there is a new way, I think, in which companies will organize themselves. And I think AI will be at the center of it, and it will be almost like a hive mind, where we're all sort of encoding the company strategy, the product strategy, the company values, the company ways of working, and our standard operating procedures, all that sort of stuff in a central AI system, intelligence system. And then we're all sort of reacting to it and working from it. That doesn't mean that there's not still leaders and, calling the shots and things like that. But I think the way in which we have this very structured hierarchy, the Andy Grove playbook of management that sort of all of us run in our organizations, I think there will be a new version of it that looks quite different. I do think it probably feels very sci-fi today, but it feels a lot closer than I think most of us may realize.
Well, you're now on the record, so you're going to come back and whatever. I don't know what milestone episode it will be, but this has certainly been a special one for the 4th century mark. And you and I are going to keep having these important conversations, and you're at the forefront, and just I love having these conversations with you.
Thanks for having me back, Dan. Congrats on 400.
You bet. Thank you. And congrats to you and the team on all the success. Keep changing the world, and come back and tell us about it. Gosh, that's all the time we have for this week on AI and the future of work. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin from People Brain. And of course, we're back next week with another fascinating guest.
Yo, it's the end of the show, time to power it down. AI's the sis, but humans wear the crown. Team Human in the house, got the vibe so clever. Dan Turchin from People Brain, making us better.
We learned about AI for humans. We're ready to conquer the future. That's all for now.
See you next time.